we really wanted to invite Lee here today and Mary, who are connected to economic development work in different ways and have information for you on different resources and how you can get connected to the local and regional economic development priorities in your area. I met Lee fairly recently, and I learned a lot, and I've been kind of doing this for a few years, and so I really wanted to make sure that you were able to get the information from him. So thank you, Lee, for being here. Thank you, Mary. We will find a way to have you join us, be able to participate, and I'm really excited. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. So I'm Lee Shuri with EDA. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who we are and what we do. And really, I hope the intent of this presentation I give you today is just another tool you can add to your toolbox so that you can take this back to your various communities that you work with and maybe identify some potential projects that we can move forward with for EDA funding. So I'm a Michigander. I grew up in Northern Michigan. I've worked in Michigan for 10 years before I came to EDA. Been with EDA, I'll be 12 years this fall. But I can tell you when I worked at the local level doing economic development, EDA really wasn't in my purview as a potential resource for economic development assistance funding. And a lot of that just has to do with the organizational structure we have. Michigan sits within the Chicago region of EDA, and there's 6 states, and we're relatively a small federal organization, or agency, I should say, not organization. When I first started, there was only 13 of us spread across the 6-state region. So based on just the limited staffing capacity, it's understandable that a lot of the local communities just might not be aware of our resources and opportunities. So we're going to change that though, and I've been trying to. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So as I mentioned, we're a small federal agency that sits under the Department of Commerce. We are a grant funding agency only, so we don't do loans. We fund eligible applicants, which I'll talk about here in a second. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're preparing communities and regions for long-term economic success in a global economy. And there's some resources out there that we'll talk about that you can tap into based on your local community that you serve. So, all right, I'm dealing with 3 screens here, so I got to make sure I'm on the right one. All right, so as I mentioned, Michigan is part of the Chicago region. We receive a yearly allocation from the federal government to fund projects within the 6-state region. There's not a dedicated funding amount to the state of Michigan. It's spread across the 6 states. So our programs are highly competitive. So what does our funding scenario look like? Fiscal year 22, if any of you have been involved with federal government before, proving budgets can be difficult. We are operating in a continuing resolution. We have been. Our fiscal year starts October 1st. And so we've been operating a continuing resolution, which basically means the government gives you a percentage of your budget that you spent the previous year. And then hopefully a final budget gets finalized and you get a full year budget. That has been finalized. I'm still waiting for numbers to see what we're looking at here. But ultimately, my point of the statement is we have money available on our fiscal year funding. It renews at October 1st. It's about $400 million total for the entire nation, which equates to about 25 to 30 million for the Chicago region. Not a ton of money, but it is money to help with economic development projects. You're probably all familiar about the American Rescue Plan, ARPA. It was a $3 billion allocation to EDA. So we went from a $400 million a year agency to a $3 billion a year agency with the stroke of a pen. We established 6 programs, as you can see on your screen. The only ones that are currently active at this point, given where we're at in the fiscal year, is the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, which does have a set aside for communities that are impacted by coal. So if any of the communities you're working with has a coal plant or previously had a coal plant, this would be an additional set aside of funds to kind of help those communities build some economic resiliency from the impacts that coal might have presented on their communities. Lastly is the Indigenous NOPO for tribal communities that is available. That's the first time EDA has ever allocated a set amount of dollars for tribal communities. The big thing to take away from this is the deadlines for both of these grant programs is Thursday, the 31st. So for our discussion today, we're going to talk about mostly our regular programs, which are going to renew again on October 1st. Anything at this point we're going to be targeting is October 1st for submission, which means you could get an application in the door August, September for a potential October consideration. All right. Our programs. So this is the program that is our most funded program is our public works assistance. So this is investment in public infrastructure. So this could be roads, sewer, water, broadband, land development like industrial parks or business parks, stormwater management. The key thing here is ownership. Everything that we invest in has to be publicly held. So we cannot do any direct investments on or private infrastructure. For example, like this is if a community had a manufacturer or business that was trying to grow and expand, but couldn't because the community didn't have adequate sewer or wastewater capacity, then we would work with that municipality, build up that sewer or water capacity, allow that manufacturer to grow and expand. So that's whenever we're doing projects, we're always looking at what is that return on investment to EDA. And in this particular case, by that company being able to grow and expand, that's that ROI that we're looking for. The jobs creation, retention, or private investment that would occur based on what EDA is investing in. The Economic Adjustment Assistance Program is our second largest program. And this is our most flexible pot of money. It allows us to do construction-based investments just as you would under the Public Works program, but it also allows us to get in the realm of non-construction. So we can do staffing capacity around a particular economic initiative in a community. Allows us to fund the creation of what's called revolving loan funds, where we would grant the money to you and then you can lend that money out to entrepreneurs, provide gap financing, whatever it might be in your particular region. This program also allows for non-construction work like studies, feasibility study work. And I have a bunch of examples or case studies that I can show you here in a second. So our last two programs are planning and local technical assistance. So that's it. There's really just 4 programs that have been in our mainstay since the 70s. Planning is exactly it. It's planning for economic development. But you will notice here that there's 2 types of planning. There's a short-term planning and a partnership planning. So what I'm referring to is short-term. So this could be economic strategic planning or some other economic planning that a community might have. We can provide some funding assistance for it. And you know what? I'm going to take one step back because there's something important I missed here that I want to just reiterate. Under the Public Works program, our average investment, so our average grant is going to be about $2 million. And so there are grant rates, or I'm sorry, there are matching requirements for all of our grants. It's dictated by distress of a community, but typically communities it's a 1-to-1 match scenario. So we would, if we're contributing $2 million, it would be a $4 million total project cost. So the community would have to come up with $2 million to match our $2 million. Under the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, you're looking probably in the range of about $850,000. That's an average investment that we would be making under that program. Now back to our planning program. So these are in the range of about $25,000 to $75,000. The partnership planning program. So we, and I'll get into this a little bit more detail later, but as I mentioned when I was giving my introduction comments, is we were a small agency, still are relatively. We went from about 13 employees. We're probably at about 35 right now for the Chicago region, that 6-state region. So one of the ways that we leverage our resources is we establish regional partnerships across the state. Michigan is covered by what's called regional planning commissions, councils of governments throughout the state, and they are our direct partners on the ground that maintain what's called a comprehensive economic development strategy. So it's a planning document, a regional planning document that guides regional economic development for their particular service area. We fund these partners to do a couple things to maintain this strategy, this regional strategy. So this would be something that you could tap into as a local community. And then ultimately, we do provide funding for technical assistance. So these regional planning commissions, councils of government can help communities with application preparation to EDA or some other technical assistance that they might need. The local technical assistance program, this is funding for feasibility studies, supply chain analysis. If you're looking to do like a business incubator, we could fund the feasibility study around that because you're going to need that before we're going to make any capital investments in a building or renovate a building for a particular entrepreneurial center. All right. So again, I'll have some more examples of this in a second. But so here's just a couple other things I just want to highlight is build to scale. This is a program that's supposed to be released any day now. This is a program that focuses on a particular industry cluster and then providing staffing behind that to help move that particular industry cluster forward. That could be commercialization work, entrepreneurial assistance, any sort of innovation, tech transfer you might have from universities. So again, that would pay for people to work on an industry cluster to advance it. We focus on that particular industry cluster. And then there's also a component of the capital challenge, which is to build a seed capital fund or a venture capital fund around a particular cluster initiative in a region. The last three things I'm just going to point out real quickly is we do provide funding assistance for coal impacted communities, which I already touched on. Another big one that we're doing right now is nuclear. We do have some current activities happening over on the western side of the state over at the Palisades nuclear power plant in Van Buren County. And then disaster. If community is ever impacted by a presidentially declared disaster, we've had a couple in the state around Midland, Bay City with the major flooding, washed out some of the dams. There is a resource or dollars available to kind of help from the economic recovery side. Not as much as the immediate FEMA disaster recovery. We would be on the back end to how do we look at long-term economic resiliency in those impacted communities. All right, so here's our economic investment priorities. So when we make investments in communities, we're not the ones that say this is the type of project you need to do. It's up to the individual communities to identify which projects would fit within our investment priorities, and then you build that case to fit one of EDA's investment priorities. The good thing about that is I can work with communities and you to figure out how to make that application or that argument for that project more competitive within our regional office. So there's 7 investment priorities that EDA works under. I'll tell you the top priority that we have is equity. Equity is our top priority for EDA. So we're focusing on communities that are traditionally underserved with the project. So if your project is investing in that kind of economic equity, economic justice, it's going to fit within our funding portfolio and be of interest to EDA. You don't have to meet all these priorities. You just would have to be one of the 7 to be eligible. Obviously, the more that you meet, the more competitive you're going to be. Recovery resilience. So how does the project build that economic recovery and resiliency? Technology-based economic development, that's where we looked at the commercialization. This also would fit the entrepreneurial element for EDA, either incubation, acceleration, maker spaces, co-working. Those are all things that we can fund. Environmental sustainable development. So if you're incorporating some sort of green infrastructure in a project, that's going to help meet that. Workforce development. We don't fund training, but we can fund the buildings and the equipment that will support the training. So we have an active investment right now in Alpena Community College. They're building out an advanced manufacturing training center at the college. We're funding that for them. but we would not fund the actual staffing for the training. That would be Department of Labor. Manufacturing, which has been our bread and butter for years for EDA, because we focus on those high skill, high wage job creation requirements, and then ultimately exporting and foreign direct investment. Any projects that have that is going to be supportive of EDA. Now, there's a breakdown of every one of those definitions that I just spoke to you about. I'm not going to go through all those, but you could find them on our website at eda.gov. And there's a list of our investment priorities, and you can read up more on them if you'd like, or you can have a copy of this presentation and look at it in more detail. All right, so recently funded EDA projects. This is the ones I think I've found the most beneficial. I think I heard earlier one of you are in Grayling area. Okay, Ray is, yeah, all right, awesome. This is a project we funded over right where 75 and 27 connect. Where Kirtland Community College is. We built out the water system in partnership with USDA, and this was to support the growth of Oroco. I think Weyerhaeuser's over there, Georgia Pacific, Kirtland Community College is expanded. It's just been a really successful project to take advantage of the softwood production in northern Michigan. This is outside of my hometown area too. I grew up just south of this area. Beaverton. This is another one we funded. Saint-Gobain is a large French-owned company in Beaverton, automotive-related company. They're doing a major expansion in the city's industrial park. We needed to relocate some roads, put in some utilities, put in an iron removal facility to accommodate their growth. And this has been another great project that occurred in the city. Again, these are all funded under a public works program. This is an interesting one we funded. This is in Lake Odessa. This is the Lakewood Wastewater Authority. They had a major sewer issue. They have large food processing companies in the area. Herbrooks is one of the largest egg providers east of the Mississippi to McDonald's. And they were having major issues with all the BODs coming in out of the plant. So we helped them expand their wastewater treatment plant. These numbers have been blown out of the water since we invested. Over 68 million has been invested in the area. Over 600 jobs created as a result of this investment to expand their sewer treatment capacity. So we do a lot of work in UP as well. Up in Michigan Tech at Houghton, we built this building. Picture's a little crummy, I know, but we built this building to support their business and technology incubator and support of Michigan Tech. So this is a great way to kind of capture the various tech transfers, commercialization opportunities that come out of the smart zone in the Houghton area. This is a cool project. So we all know the difficulties Flint has faced, but we partnered with Kettering. This is a former brownfield site called Chevy in the Hole. And we built out a 19-acre autonomous vehicle test track and research facility in partnership with GM. Over in the Eastern Upper Peninsula in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, we built this really cool business incubator building. They call it the Breeder Building. LEED certified in partnership with Lake Superior State's Prototype Development Center. It's been a really successful project for the Eastern Upper Peninsula. Here's a cool workforce development project we did in Muskegon, in downtown Muskegon. There's the old newspaper building, as you can see in the picture. We assisted community college on a complete renovation of this facility to turn it into an applied technology center. So these are a couple examples of EAA non-construction that we funded. And some of these are coal impacted. Actually, all of these are coal impacted. In Downriver, Trenton, River Rouge, Wyandotte, Ecorse, Riverview, they were all impacted by the closure of two major power plants that are owned by DTE, both in Trenton and River Rouge. So we did an economic recovery strategy for those communities. Same goes for up in the Great Lakes Bay region. They were impacted by coal. So some of the ways we looked at helping them diversify is we funded an economic recovery strategy focused on tourism. And also in Hampton Township, that's in the same area. They are the actual home of the power plant that's closing in Bay County, and we did an economic recovery strategy for them as well. Some other EAA non-construction projects. When Detroit was coming out of its bankruptcy, one of the things that was interesting to us and to the city is that there was no original equipment manufacturers in the automotive industry in Detroit. Beside the fact that it's known as the Motor City, there was no original equipment manufacturer based in the city of Detroit. So this is one of the efforts that we funded through the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation in the city of Detroit, was to finance a reindustrialization team. So this team worked together to identify land, relocation, develop marketing recruitment effort to bring in some original equipment manufacturers back into the city of Detroit so we can maintain its legacy as a motor city. Here's another investment we made up in the Bay Mills Indian community, just an effort to look at ways in which the tribe can grow and diversify its revenue stream. Tribes are primarily funded by casinos. So this is a way for them to look at other economic development opportunities to support the revenue streams for the tribe. This is an EAA construction project that we did, City of Coopersville. It was a former automotive plant that was being converted by Continental Dairy and Fairlife to provide milk processing in the city. So we converted an old automotive plant, and we provided funding to increase the water capacity at the City of Coopersville. And as I mentioned, we didn't have any OEMs in the city of Detroit. Well, guess what? We do now. There's the I-94 Industrial Park. EDA helped fund the expansion of a major street in there, which supported Flexingate, which is a major original equipment manufacturer to support automotive in the city. We get over to Oscoda too. Coletta, major employer over in Oscoda in terms of airplane maintenance and management. And we funded several hangar developments, or not the hangar, I should say, I apologize, the aprons to allow for some hangar expansions with Coletta. Another investment in the city of Clare, we funded an industrial park build out. This park, actually, I need to update my number because I believe this park is completely filled. All right, local technical assistance. So here's some additional work that we've done throughout the state. In Northeast Michigan, we funded a wood corridor cluster analysis. At Oakland University, we did an incubator feasibility study for the city of Pontiac. And then we also fund a university center program. I know Mary's on the call today, and Mary is a recipient of EDA's funds to carry on the work that they're doing, the excellent work they do at the Michigan State University. And I believe Mary's going to talk about that here in a second. But we also fund the University of Michigan Flint, and each university center does something different. There's a university center funded in all of the states across the United States, but specifically in the Chicago region, that work is interchangeable. So you could engage like Purdue University or University of Wisconsin on efforts that you're looking to do in Michigan, and they have the ability to cross-state partnership. Just a couple more technical assistance projects we funded. Muskegon, they had the BC Cobb power plant close, and this is an opportunity to look at reuse of the Muskegon port because this is a major anchor on the port. You're looking at redevelopment opportunities. Eastern Upper Peninsula is a transportation logistics study we did. And then way down in the southwest corner of Michigan, Berrien County, we did some corridor studies. So this is just to help give you ideas of what we can invest in and what we've done. All right, a couple more planning investments we've made in the Eastern Upper Peninsula. We did with the ISD up there. We did a major broadband feasibility study, and now I know that project's currently under implementation. In the Southeast SEMCOG region, so Southeast Michigan, we're funding a major CCED investment in that area. Same with the W. Upjohn Institute. Those are currently unserved areas when it comes to economic development districts or direct partners. So we're looking at building capacity to create new partners on the ground in those areas. And then this map, I know it's hard to see, and I apologize, but you can see the various shaded regions, and those are the regions that EDA recognizes our partners. So wherever you're at And if we need to get you a better map, we can. But I would encourage you to connect with these particular entities to find out what their planning efforts are in their particular region, engage your work. All right. So I'm going to try to wrap this up here, and I'm going to run through a couple brief slides on, what does a competitive application look like? So again, eligible applicants to EDA are states, local units of government, special purpose units of governments like DDAs, brownfield redevelopment authorities, institutions of higher education, and nonprofits that are working with local units of government. We cannot fund private entities. So who's eligible? So whenever we're going to do an implementation project, like a construction under EAA or under Public Works, you have to meet certain eligibility criteria. You must have an unemployment rate, a 24-month unemployment rate that's 1% above the national average, or you need to have a low per capita income, and that per capita income has to be less than 80% of the national average. There are some special need thresholds that can be considered, such as coal closures, natural disasters. Right now, everybody in the United States is eligible for EDA given the COVID-19 impacts. So those are some of the scenarios we have to look at. The higher unemployment or the lower per capita income a community has, the higher the grant rate they can get. I mentioned the grant rates are 1-to-1, but the more distressed they are, the maximum we can go is 80% on a project. So here's another thing, and I've already talked about, any project that comes EDA has to be consistent with a regional economic development strategy, a CEDS for short, comprehensive economic development strategy. I can tell you right now, every county in the state of Michigan is covered by a CEDS. So I can connect you up with who you need to talk to if you're interested in finding out who that individual or organization is. Couple things we can't do. We can't do grants to for-profit organizations. We can't do projects where you might be a public-private partnership where a developer has some sort of equity stakes in a building. We can't touch it. It has to be publicly held or nonprofit held. We can't do projects that had eminent domain on them. And if we're doing like an incubator project or an acceleration project where you're providing technical assistance to businesses, that effort that you support the businesses with cannot be leveraged to take equity stakes in those companies. And then we cannot do anything residential. Match. So match can come through a multitude of sources. It can be local dollars, be bonding. It can be general fund dollars, it can be TIF dollars. You can have match from private sector as long as they aren't getting any preferential consideration, like, they have rights of first refusal on something. State dollars are acceptable as well. Federal dollars are not, except there are exceptions. USDA rural development loans are eligible. CDBG grants are eligible, and that's about it. Right now, the ARPA dollars are eligible if they come from the government services portion of the municipal dollars that have been received. All right, are you ready for EDA consideration under construction? We better have clear ownership of who owns what. So if land's owned by a city, but the utilities are by a utility authority, that's the partnership of the city and the utility authority on an application to EDA, okay? If there's any existing mortgages or liens on the property you're asking EDA to support, that's gonna create an obstacle for us. If there is an existing lien by a bank or something like that, the bank's gonna have to agree to subordinate their position to EDA, and EDA is gonna require first position on that particular parcel of land. You will have to have a preliminary engineering complete as part of this project. So you will want to get an engineer on board to come up with your preliminary engineer's opinion of cost on a project that establishes your baseline cost for any construction project. And then also Davis-Bacon applies here, so prevailing wage. So you will have to pay that on any of your contracts that you, and you will have to monitor. Non-construction projects, indirect costs are eligible. Excuse me. Equipment costs are eligible. And then you remember everything through the federal government has to be competitively procured. So you can't sole source particular contractors or equipment. It all has to be through a competitive bid process. These are a couple things that would make you more competitive versus not. Cash is king over in kind. We have to geographically distribute our funds across the 6-state region. So that's something that you really can't control. But obviously, if we're going to be investing in a community that has been a historic EDA desert, then that's a benefit to you. The more distressed the community is, the more competitive they're going to be. The strong return on that investment to the taxpayer. Again, the high skill, high wage job creation, private sector investment. Do you have the correct regional partners at the table? If it's an incubator, who's running it? Is it a university or community college that you're engaged with to help make this thing successful? Is your project supported by the CCEDs? And do you meet EDA's investment priorities? So again, this is our process. We have no set deadlines. This is just rolling applications for both all of our programs. Obviously, the earlier you submit in a fiscal year, the better, because there's less competition. And then this is just a shout out to me. So again, I work directly with you on your application. I can review your application before you actually submit it to EDA, give you some feedback. I actually pitch your project to an investment team in Chicago. Unfortunately, I don't have a vote, so I can't figure out what anybody's going to do in terms of your project. I can make educated guesses, but it's ultimately, it's best you consult me early on in the process so that we can make sure we keep project costs eligible and that we're positioning you to be the most competitive as you can be. So here's my information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, but hopefully this is just another tool in your toolbox that you can use to help your communities moving forward. So that's it for me. Happy to take questions if there is any.
Lee, when you were giving some examples of projects, a lot of them, not all of them, but were quite large, right? In the millions of dollars, big projects. I'm just curious when in that process, communities start talking with you about the possibility of putting an application together and being a funding partner for different projects?
When it's an idea, ultimately. That's a good question too, is when do we look at, when is a project too small? When it comes to construction projects, we like to be at least 25% of the total project cost, okay? And we don't like to be less than roughly $500,000. So you're looking at about $500,000 minimum of where we would participate. And as long as we're at least 25% of that total project or more. The reason we do that is it's a lot of work to put these applications together, okay? And a project that is a $500,000 project versus a $5 million project, the same work goes into both. You're going to have to go through the NEPA process on any of those projects. So our engineers on our team really don't like to deal with those small scale projects because it's too much work for the overall benefit that it's going to produce. So it needs to be at least a $500,000 project, at least where we're at 25% or more, for us to participate. Now, that's for construction, right? The non-construction project can be way smaller, like these $25,000 to $50,000 range. But I can tell you, it's got to be an economic development project. We don't do community development, so we don't do streetscape. We don't do a little park or something like that. Now, can we do streetscape as part of a project? Sure we can, but that can't be the justification for us to make the investment. It has to be, we need to expand this road, put in larger sewer and water capacity lines, and as a result, we're going to put in some trees and some benching once the project is complete. That's okay, but that can't be the justification for why we're making that investment.
Thank you, Lee. Aurelius?
Yeah, good morning, Lee. This information has been extremely helpful, so thank you. I'm the CEDM Fellow working in Lansing, and my primary focus is working with the South MLK Corridor Improvement Authority. And recently, a project we've been undertaking is a property called Logan Square, which is on the south side of Lansing, which has been historically underserved and underinvested community. So I guess like investment priority, it would kind of fall under equity. We're looking to source some planning assistance for a redevelopment plan of the site. And I just had a question in terms of if that would qualify for the planning assistance that the EDA offers in terms of getting like a utilizing those funds to bring on a consultant that can help with the planning of redevelopment.
Yeah, so great question. So just I'm sure you're already doing this, but you know, I work a lot with LEAP. So Carl Dorschimer or Bob Trezise there, and then also remember there's Tri-County Regional Planning. So Tri-County is going to be EDA's direct partner on the ground. I think they're going through a bit of a staffing change right now, but Nicole Bomber is a person I would recommend that you engage with. So to get to your question, potentially, the problem we would have here, and maybe I'm wrong, is, well, let me ask you this: who owns Logan Square?
Yeah, so that when you brought up private like investment, it's owned by a private investment company out of California, but
Okay.
but LEAP and the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority has like taken a keen interest and identified it as a priority site to then, you know, focus on that site. So it's privately owned. We've had communication with the owner, but yeah, it is privately owned.
Yeah, so on a specific site where it's privately held, we're not going to be able to give planning dollars to help that private property owner figure out what their best use for their site is. Now, if it was something in which we were looking at maybe a larger geographic area for redevelopment, like including like the MLK corridor, including that strip, like an overall kind of larger neighborhood type of redevelopment plan, we could probably look at that. But when we can't do something where it's site specific for where a private property owner has full control, where it's potentially multiple private property owners encompassing even some publicly owned land throughout that kind of area, then I would say, yeah, that's something we could probably take a look at.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Michelle.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the presentation and very good information. I do believe that Bridgeport Township did receive funding for our feasibility study.
Yes.
I was also wondering, because we're in the process of looking to build a new township building, would that be a project that will fall up under equity, because it is underserved, but it is also lacking a actual township building?
Yeah.
So
no, yeah, good question, Michelle. And the immediate answer is going to be no, but let me explain why. Because sometimes when you hear the name Public Works in a program, you immediately think of municipal buildings, you know, public works facility, but no. So the intent of the investment still has to meet what our mission as an agency. So it is that economic development investment. And so when you're looking at a municipal building, that's not really it, right? It's so we have to focus on, okay, is the building an incubator? Okay, then that might fit something we can look at. Is it a, you know, a makerspace co-working facility, workforce training center? Okay, but we couldn't set up just general like municipal offices.
Okay, I understand, because okay, well then I'll think of another project then. So okay.
All right, good deal.
So I just want to say one the big takeaway I wanted also for the fellows to have from this presentation, that was something that I learned from Lee, is the existence of these CEDS documents, these comprehensive economic development strategies that exist for, Lee, you mentioned, for every county in Michigan, and that having alignment, finding a project that has alignment with that already established strategy is going to be a great way to think about what could be eligible for funding. It also just helps you better understand what the economic development goals are for your region. And so I thought that that would be a great next step for all fellows to seek out, reviewing the CEDS document, and also connecting with your regional economic development organization that oversees that. And Grace was so kind to put together a document for all of you. She did research on who is the right person for all of you to connect with to learn more and to find out more about your region's economic development priorities. So I thought that was a great resource. Thank you, Lee, for talking about them, and Grace for putting that together. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Zumbrunnen. Mary was recently took on a new role at the Center for Community Economic Development. I will let her introduce herself because I don't want to get her title wrong. Mary is a former fellow from the community of Adrian. On my screen, Mary, you're right next to Blake, who's in Tecumseh, and I know that there's some overlap in some economic development projects, actually. So I'm excited to have you here, Mary. I know that the university has a lot of great resources, and I want fellows to know about them to be able to plug into them.
So I want to introduce the center a little bit, but I'll introduce myself first. Like Sarah said, I'm a former fellow. I was an entrepreneur, and I had a small consultancy doing community and economic development work around Michigan, from Marquette actually to Detroit, beginning in 2007. And in 2014, I went to Flint and spent some time there, and ran into a lot of challenges and really had some experiences there. And so I actually wrote a book about community and economic development using supply chain strategies to help improve some of our relationships for more efficient and effective delivery of goods and resources out to communities. And then unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, my business got walloped and went under. So I felt so fortunate and lucky to be able to join the center. So yes, it's transcendent partnership, aligning agendas for collective impact. And so what all of you are doing is probably in some form or fashion focused on collective impact, actually, because that's bringing together all sectors. So public, private, nonprofit, academic, philanthropic, bringing them all together for some kind of common goal. And usually that would be taking on a larger initiative that one organization or one sector can't solve on its own. So I am the assistant director for the Center for Community and Economic Development at Michigan State University. And I think that, honestly, I think I have this job probably because I was a fellow in 2019, because at that time when I was down in Adrian, I started working with the economic developer there named Chris Miller, and we had a great relationship. And then when the pandemic hit, actually I should say in 2019, I did a co-learning plan that I'm going to touch on here in a little bit. That's part of the Eda University Center. It's one of our models for getting information out about new innovative policies and practices. And so I think that was really the lift that got me connected with the center. And what was interesting and ironic then is later on in 2021, the economic developer Chris Miller wound up being a fellow at our center. So we sort of flip-flopped, and we joke about that a lot, but it shows you that you never know what's going to be around the corner too, especially like crisis, pandemic, or where you're going to go. So it's those networks and connections, I think, that are super valuable. And as I said, my colleague John Melcher is on here. and he is the Associate Director for the Center for Community and Economic Development. John, are you there? Hey, do
I'm
you,
here.
so I was gonna ask Sarah, can we screen share? And I was just gonna show the website, and I'm wondering, John, could you do a really brief intro of the center?
Sure. Yeah, I'm John Melcher. I'm the Associate Director, and I've been working and doing this community and economic development for, I guess, close to, well, over 35 years at the university. I've been part of the center for all and much of that time. But the center really came out of the 1960s, late 1960s, when we had a lot of unrest in our cities, and particularly Detroit. And the university wanted to come up with some way of expressing the opportunity for them to use the resources of the university in more urban and community settings. And that really was the beginning of the Center for Urban Affairs, which is what we have evolved to today. It's the Center for Community and Economic Development. And we've follow simple principles of community development that were developed in the mid-1980s, and we've adhered to help guide us in our work. So we're mission driven, guided by our principles, and have a set of practices that have developed over the years, and we keep looking for new ones. And that's part of the work that we do, is co-creating in community. And I think what you see on the front right now is sort of a current expression of some of our concentrations, our areas of interest, a focus for research, for collaboration and partnership. And we really are after our, at the heart of what we do is strong and healthy communities. And we have a very strong focus on issues of equity. And we try to make sure that in all that we do, that principle is represented. And if you look at our principles, you'll find that they are very inclusive. But in our focus areas right now, we're looking at resiliency planning, some financial resiliency, circular economy, and 21st century communication, which is broadband. And those are just the current sort of columns, if you will, with holding up our structure. But we are always looking to change, modify, and this is just our sort of current expression of the work that we're doing. And as you will, see, if you look at our project areas, you'll find that we have activities and collaborations and co-creations in each of those pillars. So anyhow, that's who we are. We are a University Center. We've been really part of the University Center since really I began in the mid-1980s. So I go back a long time. I know Lee. I've worked with his predecessors, several of them before him, and continue to work with our current set of collaborators, particularly our regional planning organizations that are represented to the statewide organization of the Michigan Association of Regions, which we're also very happy to work with and share strong interest. So as Lee was saying, as we move forward and really look at helping all of you to connect with your regional planning organizations and understand the CCEDs. We can help do that and help to also do any kind of assistance in trying to interpret maybe some of the planning, what it might mean, what it could mean, and any other kind of connection and partnerships that we might hold in the area. Anyhow, thank you. That's who we are.
All right, so I'm assuming you're all seeing CCED's mission right now. Okay. I have multiple screens here, so it's hard to tell what you're looking at. I have the bar in a certain space, so I hope that you're seeing this PowerPoint here. So the EDA University Center is a center within the center, is how I talk about it. And we received designation to become a EDA University Center about 11 years ago, I think. But we've had a relationship with EDA since the late 80s, I believe. And if we had more time, John could also give you a rundown on that. But essentially, I mean, I could read this slide to you, but I think the quickest way to say it and the way that I think about it in my head is acting as a bridge. What we do as a university center is really try to, we act as a bridge. So it's leveraging like tools and resources and all those awesome ideas that you're having on the ground and trying to help bring them back to the government, and then getting a little bit of seed funding from the government to help them take hold and anchor on the ground out in communities, and grow. And so we do that, like Lee said, all the university centers are different. But the way that we do it is we really engage through 3 different kinds of models. And as I said, in 2019, I did a co-learning plan as a fellow, and that's, I think, one of the big reasons is I was able to get in here today. So I would encourage all of you to take advantage of these opportunities. And if you have ideas swirling around in your head, or you're listening to your coworkers and you're thinking, gee, I really want to try something, or I want to see if we can go after a bigger pot of money, but maybe we need to do some more research, or maybe we need to pilot something first and really test it before we're comfortable pulling together a larger group and doing something. These 3 kinds of projects are really a perfect way to do that and to get your feet wet. And there's publishing opportunities as well. And then there's also connecting to larger networks of expertise around the state that can be really beneficial as outcomes that for you personally from doing this. So I would say the 3 pieces that I would want to highlight here are the co-learning plans, our innovation fellowships, and then student-led faculty-guided projects. And so the bulk of this, I was just going to run through and share with you a little bit about each of these forms of engagement and what it can be, and then give you a couple just hard examples, I guess, of it. So our co-learning plans, the way that I think about this is, if you have an idea in your head, or you're researching something, say, for your community within your work plans, you could take that and set out a scope of work for however long the rest of your commitment is. In fact, so I should ask that first, actually, Sarah. What's the scheduling for this year look like?
We haven't even reached the halfway point yet. So fellows, their term ends at the end of the year.
Okay. Well, so here's something that you could consider then. Our calendar is gonna, we're about halfway through ours, and it's gonna start again in the fall. So if you're researching a project or a policy and you want to make some recommendations on it, the co-learning plan is a prime opportunity for you. And it will get you some publication recognition as well. So using, again, the example that I did in 2019, I was working on opportunity zones in Lenawee County. And so I didn't know a thing about opportunity zones. And they were relatively new because the legislation just came out about a year and a half prior to that. And so we looked at, okay, what does that mean specifically for rural areas in small towns? Because opportunity zones typically were in like really dense urban cores. But not typically, they're all over the state of Michigan, but it seemed like the work that was out there and being published, I should say, was in urban cores. So we thought, okay, how can we do a spin on this and figure it out? So applied for some co-learning plan money, and it was about $8,000. And it was given to the city, and we could have used it to pay ourselves, almost like contractors. And I wrote this jointly with the economic developer, I should say, and Adrian. And essentially it's a 20-page white paper. And so you present this at our annual Innovate Michigan Summit, and it's a really good opportunity to sort of see and be seen, and to kind of test drive some of your ideas on, theoretically, I should say, before implementing them on the ground. So that's kind of the idea of a co-learning plan. And we've got 2 happening this year that are going to wrap up by August. And so I just want to share a little bit, because I guess I'll spend more time on these 2, and then I'll just kind of fly through the rest here. But Sean, I think that the key point to highlight about all of the authors and the people that are doing our types of EDA projects are the super diverse background that they have, because I want to make it really clear you can come from any background. You don't have to you don't have to think of yourself as an economic developer. You don't have to be certified in something. You don't have to have a poli-sci degree or something like that. These are, you don't have to come, sometimes I feel like people are afraid to come to the table because they think, oh, I don't have the right title, or I can't do this, or I'm too young, or whatever. And you are all part of community, and I think that's so important to keep in the front of your mind, because you are the change makers. So what I'm trying to say with this is, for example, we specifically work in socially and economically distressed communities. And Sean happens to be the executive director of the Birmingham shopping district, which is absolutely not socially or economically distressed. But his heart and his passion, he used to live in Pontiac. And so he has a nonprofit there. And so a lot of him and his efforts are still focused there. And he had this idea about, what do we do looking at the loop, this space, this highway that is around downtown Pontiac? It really cuts off neighborhoods and residents who are Pontiac citizens, but they don't go to their downtown space because foot traffic can't get across this highway. So it's really wrecked a lot of the development, and so it's like big. It would be like a new Panera is what they would try to attract, or even when they had something that would come up like a barber shop or an independently owned business, they would come in and they would go out because nobody can afford the rent, and local people are not actually shopping there. It's more of a tourist destination. So Sean is using all of his expertise and skills, and got a team of people trying to figure out how can we shake up this really traditional way of doing development for a space that's so cut off, and other things that are working for areas that are similar, maybe like a Saginaw or Flint or Detroit. They don't work in Pontiac because of this loop, really, unfortunately. So he's trying to see how can they get around that. So this is an example of a co-learning plan where he's not actually out doing anything. He's sitting behind his desk and he's conducting research, and he's putting it on this paper, and then he's going to present it. Now, if he felt that there was success with that, then he could go to the next level, which would be our other type of model, additional one, which is a fellowship. So I'm gonna talk about that a little bit, but I just want to share kind of like the building up of how these projects work to help create leadership pipelines and to help ideas really seed so that they can do the snowballing piece. And another great example here of a co-learning plan author is Ashley. Ashley is a master's of social work. She doesn't have a background necessarily at least in many economic classes. And yet you can see the title here is Regional Tax-Based Sharing. So she's created a calculation. She's going to be doing some projections around the mid-Michigan area, looking at what would the impacts be? What are the implications if Ingham, Eaton, Clinton, Shiawassee, all of those 4 counties, if we did regional tax-based sharing, what would the impact be? So again, she's not going out and talking to businesses. She's doing this behind her desk, and she's getting about $8,000 in funding to take that and roll with it. And what we do with these is, after we collect these reports, we share them in presentations, but we also have a resource library. And then we invite, certainly all of our network is aware of it. There's about 2,000 or 3,000 folks in that, but we're always going out to meetings and sharing it, and people are welcome to look through it and see if any of those ideas could be slightly modified for their communities and their own unique challenges, and then implemented. So I would say the other piece that I would really want to touch on, there are 3, but I'm going to focus more on 2 of them heavily here, is the innovation fellowships. So for example, using Sean again, next year, he wants to apply for an innovation fellowship, and that would be $10,000. There's no white paper that is required with it. He simply would submit a work log and then go out and try to work with committees and groups and council and the commissioners in implementing what his findings showed from his co-learning plan. So that's not the way they all work. It's not necessarily a direct growth from a co-learning plan to become a fellow, but many times that's a good way to get started. And you'll see on the slide here, people like Angela Barbash. To talk about her specifically, she looked at mapping a ecosystem for community impact investing. Now, the person that I had worked with in 2019, the Adrian economic developer, Chris Miller, he happens to be the national board chair for NC3, which is the National Coalition for Community Capital. And his passion and his side hobby was community capital. And so now he does that full time. So looking at Angela here, he had worked with her, and I don't know, I think she was like, maybe it's 2018, 2017, John can correct me, but he looked at the work that she was doing and then decided that he was going to go out and pilot in a few different communities, actually building community capital campaigns. It's so many C's, so many C words, community capitals. Yeah, so that's why we call it NC3. But so that was a direct growth. And then one of his counterparts, a person down in Detroit named David Palmer, is a 2022 fellow. And he is looking at community capital as a way to help rebuild different mortgage tools so that they're more accessible to people who want smaller mortgages. So these things just grow and build, and they're organic and they spread, and we don't know where they're going to go, but it's cool when they do get traction. I mean, so I could tell you specific stories about each of these people, and I won't because it's 11:10, but going on here, specific to the Lansing area, and I heard you mention the Logan Square space. Tony here is the Chief Equity Officer for Lansing Economic Area Partnership, and he has a fellowship. He's a two-time former co-learning plan author, and he is taking one of the ideas from last year, actually two of the ideas from last year, and looking at community trusts with county commissioners and actually implementing that and building it, and then looking for like a cooperative investment, opportunity. And one of the places that he's looking at, the physical location, is potentially Logan Square. So he's going to be talking about this and his findings at our annual Innovate Michigan Summit. And I think I said really briefly in the beginning, that is where we share all of these ideas, and authors and fellows present what's actually happening. But then we have all kinds of other attendees who are either part of the network and have presented in the past, or are people coming to learn and seeing if these ideas could be tweaked and tailored to their own spaces. And then David here is sort of following in the Angela footsteps and the Chris Miller footsteps. David's coming along, and a piece of his idea at looking at innovative mortgage tools is heavily focused on community capital and having philanthropic support as well for new mortgage tools. And you can read about each of these folks online too. I mean, I'm going through this at warp speed because it's 11:15. So I'm not going to go too far into our student leads. This is essentially if you have an idea and you're not sure what to do about it, but it's something that a class working together could focus on, like a capstone project, the student leads are a good opportunity here. We have about $3,500 to $5,000-ish per project, that underneath the guidance of faculty. And it doesn't have to be at Michigan State. It could be U of M, it could be Wayne State, it could be Michigan Tech, it could be Northern. Whatever community partners make sense, they could take that on and kind of do a deeper dive, almost like consulting into it. So we've got two of these going on. One, actually, they're both in Detroit. One is with the Community Development Corporation. They're doing some inventorying, and then the other one is with the Wayne County Land Bank. And they're helping sort of evaluate programming as well as parcels for the next iteration of the land bank's strategic plan. So these, I would say the student-led projects are typically more traditional. They're right in urban planning curriculum. They fit right into that if it's with Michigan State's partners. unless there's an innovative project that a community member brings to us, and in that case, we'll find the right class that's most appropriate. John already shared with you some of our focus areas. Certainly, we've had a lot of impact over the last 11 years, and have continued to leverage more EDA funds. And so I think that the point that Nat had wanted to make, and I think Lee would want me to say as well, is that if we can help you explore different ideas, say working through the CCEDs or meeting with your MAR partners, and we can help tee up a project with just a little bit of seed funding that gets you in a space where you can build a larger EDA application, then that would be a real win. That would be ideal. So please do put on your thinking caps and let us know if there's any kind of TA that we can provide or direct you. Because beyond having the minor seed funding, we're a good resource and a great network. So if we don't have a suggestion, we can certainly point everybody in different directions to go find what they need. So the last piece I guess I would share is the REI website. If you go to ced.msu.edu, that's the Center for Community and Economic Development. And then if you go underneath programs and you go to Eda University Center, you get to this interesting little landing page. You click the arrow, and then you'll come to our space. And the way that you can apply for this and get involved is projects. You can go to the current projects and learn about what we're doing, but then, like I said, this fall we're going to do our next round. So as you've got a little bit of time, maybe 4 or 5 months left until we go into the fourth quarter this year. That's crazy to even say. I feel like we just started 2022. You take a peek at this, look at the overview, and see if there's something that you might have cooking that you can get in the pipeline for a co-learning plan or a fellowship. So if you've already been working and you think that you've got enough data and information that you can go out and implement, and you're already embedded in your community and you've got that credibility in the networks, go for it. You don't have to do a co-learning plan first. But on our overview here, you can click any one of these. They'll eventually take you to the application. And this year, besides the 4 pillars, we have some focus areas. So they'll be different in the fall, but I guarantee you, probably housing, some kind of communication. A few of these are going to remain the same because these issues aren't going away. So I would invite you to browse through this, ask me any questions. My contact information is on our website, and certainly Sarah can give it to you. So I'll stop now, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free. And I'll stop sharing too.
Thank you so much, Mary. Does anyone have a question that comes to mind right now? Belle?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm very interested. But you mentioned something about MARS. What are MARS partners?
Oh, Michigan Association of Regions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do I have a contact in the Great Lakes Bay region area?
Yes. I don't know who that would be off the top of my head, but John, Sarah, and Lee certainly will connect you.
Thank you.
Grace, are the MARS partners the ones that you have collected for the fellows, or is that different?
I don't know if they're under the EDA website. They were listed as development districts, so I'm unsure if that is the same thing. I don't know. Mary, do you know if there's a difference?
Yeah, I can answer that. Our regional planning organizations in our state, in our area, it's Tri-County Regional Planning here in Lansing, for instance. And they are also, though, under federal designation and EDA, they are referred to as Economic Development District, EDD. Okay, and they co-own, being in our state, regional planning organizations, and that's how it is in a lot of states. But the the regional planning organization is really a creature of state government. In other words, they said, hey, we establish these regional planning organizations, but we really didn't give them very much to do. But what we allowed them to do was to take federal money a lot of times and help manage within their multi-county regions. So the state is divided up into regions, and they are all represented in this Michigan Association of Regions. However, there's another, we got regions on top of regions in the state.
We so
Like
do,
everywhere,
yeah.
okay. And so there's prosperity regions, which are almost like these regional planning organization regions, only with a couple of little differences, okay? And I know this gets complicated, but those are, again, mainly state designations. When we talk about the federal and EDA in particular, we're talking about which are now economic development districts. And almost all of our regional planning organizations are economic development districts. Interestingly, SEMCOG is the only one that hasn't been, but they're in a process and becoming an EDD now, and they may be now actually an EDD, but they're in that process. That's just, but City of Detroit has always been able to go to get the big money from EDA because cities are allowed to go do that in other municipalities. So yes, our regional organizations now are where we will touch base, and they are the ones that do, they get money from EDA to do these comprehensive economic development strategies. And the strategies, they engage stakeholders throughout their multi-county region to participate in the planning function, where they identify initiatives, projects, and other things that they would like to see happen, or the communities and other organizations have put forward that say these are of significance to our region, and we would like to, when possible, we're going to seek federal funding. Now, when the federal funding from different programs become available, like EDA, they say, hey, go to your CEDs, make sure the projects that you want to fund are represented in your CEDs, because we want to know that you are not doing this disassociated from your planning processes in your communities. And so they require that kind of relative, or that's connection at the community level. And so counties, CEDs are not, when I heard Lee, he was saying, well, every county has a CEDs. Well, every region has a CEDs, and every county is represented in the region. There isn't necessarily a county level CEDs. And I thought that was a little confusing. If you went to go look for one, you won't find it. You'll find it at the regional level, and you'll find your county represented in there. And so that's what we'll do, or that's what each of you, and we can talk about how that happens for you to understand, but there is a planner, generally one person, who is actually the EDA planner inside these regional structures. And remember, these regional structures, they all do different things from another. They're all regional, but some do transportation, some do more recreation. It depends on the funding that's available to them and what their partner communities would like to put forward. Again, context is all different for every place you go. Context is really important. It's where you get the meaning for all that you will do is in your local context. So EDA CEDs will have your county represented, hopefully projects. If not, generally there's enough broad language that if there's a project you'd like to try to get in there, you'll say, oh yeah, this can be covered, or they'll do a modification to the CEDs to include it. So it's not a stumbling block at all. Just think of it as a very constructive planning process to make sure that what we do in our communities has, some cohesion and has hopefully aggregate value as you do these things in different communities. We know they have impact in each community, but hopefully together they'll have a larger regional and maybe even statewide impact. And that's what, and if you noticed in Lee's conversation, that's already where he was going. Once you were talking about a specific project, he kept saying, well, but if you went bigger, now we can talk, or, broader, not necessarily a bigger project, but broader in its how you contextualize it and conceptualize it. And I think that corridor example was a kind of a good example, because it's really a lot more than that one shopping center that they want to fix in that corridor, right? And it really is a bigger bigger plan. And so I think they have a good, he gave them enough information to kind of go and be able to maybe then cultivate and develop an idea out of that. But he started off saying, so go leap. And we already got that connection. And he said, and then he said, tri-county regional planning. And I think that's really important. Before he even said what about the project, he said, these are your partners. And so they really want to make sure, and that's why the CEDs, make sure that you're in line with the local partners before you even get to him, is basically kind of what he's saying, because without that, it's a no-go.
Thank you, John. I think that's really helpful. Some more context for what Lee was trying to say about those sets. That wasn't that clear about the county. So thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much, Mary. So much information. Everyone, it's a lot, I know, but what I really wanted you to hear about is that, these opportunities through the University Center can help you, they're really good opportunities to dive deeper on a topic that's come up that you're interested in. It can be a great professional development opportunity. It can be a bridge to what comes after the fellowship. It can be a way to connect with partners that you're interested in working with more closely. So I think those are just things to consider and look into. I just wanted you to have that information now while you still have time to explore that. And more than half of the fellowship time left. So thank you, John and Mary. I definitely am taking away new information about the center, and thank you so much for really articulating how much of a resource, how much you are available to help, talk through project ideas and be that bridge and make those connections. So that's really, really, we appreciate you.
Yeah. And Mary and I and Grace, we'll be available to you guys to talk, just even in brainstorming. If you just get started in the right direction, it really helps, and you can kind of take it from there. But sometimes that's hard to do, because there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. It's a little disorienting. But if you're doing something new and you're on the kind of front edge, it's going to be disorienting. It can't be anything but. But what we try to do is talk about what we do know and help you maybe shape it into an idea that you can then begin to work with your partners and really shape into something. But we'll help you to the extent that we can. Happy to help. And it's really nice to meet you all. Sorry I was late.
No worries. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a good week. What a great way to start the week.